G'day, hi, and welcome. Good morning, everybody. Okay, better get that piled up so I can throw in some more. Stick my fire. Okay, let me show you what's going on. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. These guys are going out today. I'm going to show you how those things work. But, yeah, those things are going to be lethal machines. I've been, after last night's fiasco, which the fiasco was, I got the 62-pound beaver done. I tried a new method of skinning, and this being the first beaver I skinned in many years. Not many years, but since I think 2014 or something like that. And that's, I think it's going to be a beast. I don't like the new method as much, and there's a couple of mistakes that I made, not on the pelt, but in the skinning process that really slowed. It took me 2.5 hours. So that's about the time it takes to do an otter. Now there's my little frozen ball of raccoon over here. He's yeah, he ain't happy. But I gotta let that thaw out, and I'll flesh these guys tonight. Hey, yeah, there's my other snowshoes. I got my raccoon wire stretchers. However, there's a reason why that wire's on there. I'm gonna have to modify them. I prefer to use boards, even though they don't dry as quick. There's my mink, just so you know. He's coming along. I didn't do too bad on my mink. There we go. The only area I kind of missed was right about there. It's not that bad, but a couple of chunks there I kind of missed. Well, yeah, and one little hole right there. And I think I put the pin in the other hole. Hopefully they'll never see it. Unfortunately, I had to use pins on the tail because I didn't have the proper mesh screen, which does a much nicer job. He's not fully frozen. Or she, I guess, is not fully frozen. The biggest mistake with that was cutting the tail off, I think, was number one. I don't know why the other people cut the tails off, but they cut the tails off, and then they skinned them on the table. I've never skinned a beaver on the table. My dad says that's how he used to do it. But where I made the mistake was with the legs, not popping the knife through the top and trying to skin out the legs a different way. I don't know what I was thinking, or lack thereof, which probably could have saved 10 minutes per leg, easy, which would have cut it down 45 minutes of actual skinning. So I'm going to show the footage anyway. It's a lot of footage, and I just let the camera run out. But otherwise, it went fairly well, but it was 2.5 hours, so I can't be spending 2.5 hours skinning a beaver if I'm going to, you know, for the Beaver Blitzkrieg. So it made me rethink my Beaver Blitzkrieg. Catching the animals is not going to be a problem. That's not going to be a problem at all. My problem is going to be keeping up with them. My two biggest problems are, there's my beaver stretchers in the back, and I'll show you these guys when I get them out. I got a couple of different sizes in there. Hopefully there's one that size. The nice thing, the reason why I made these, the concept is simple, is I just make, it was the same problem I ran into last time I was trapping. I looked at some of my old files, and I was actually doing quite a few captures, but I'd capture something. I didn't have enough plywood. So the problem I ran into was I had no place to put my beavers, right? So I skinned the beaver, fleshed the beaver in one night, and then build one of these things. Is, you know, it was basically 9 hours of just building these things and trying to do it all in one night. You get overwhelmed when you do that. Don't do that. That's what your off season is for. But however, when it's go time, then you have to regulate. Like I'm anticipating a few beavers a night in the Beaver Blitzkrieg, the way, especially trapping the house, and then, you know, you trap out that house, then you're going to move on to the next house. And when I get up to the big dams, I mean, there's probably going to be like 500 beavers there, 250 to 500 beavers there. I'll have to make a better assessment once I get around to see how far back it goes. There might be 10 beaver houses on that flood. So there's, you know, there's a lot of potential for animals there. So the thing is, catching them isn't the problem. It's being able to, if I'm going to be spending estimated, it's not, my times are going to come down just with that little trick. The reason why I didn't remember that trick was because I know I'd done it before. Like, I watched Coon Creek Outdoors. That guy you can learn a lot from. I recommend him. I think he's the best trapper channel out there, just for showing you how to do things. And I watched I wanted to watch the video on, like, I watched the video on his video on fleshing the beaver, picked up a few little tips there that'll probably save some time, and I watched his boarding process. I'm going to tie the legs. I'm not going to staple them, but I'm going to try staples. I've never tried staples. I've always used thumbtacks on the beaver, which work well. They work well, but you run out of thumbtacks very quickly. So I'm going to try the staple method, but when I didn't bother watching because I was like, well, I remember how to skin a beaver. I've done enough of them, you know what I mean? But the refresher, and this is very important, guys. If you're getting back into it, yes, you've been doing it for 50 years, great. But just watch some videos and just get a refresher, because there's always somebody who does something a little bit different. Like, I'm watching these guys who skin them in 5 minutes, cutting the tails off and the legs off. The leg thing, yeah, that worked okay, because I started doing that, I remember, before. That makes it easier to get the legs through, for sure. You have to take the feet off, you can't get, otherwise you can't get the leg through the pelt, right? Yeah, so that part, yeah, that was fine. The cut up the center, well, that's just, no problem with that. The problem was not figuring out where I was with the legs. And I'm going to give you a tip here. One of the problems I did with this beaver is I caught him, and he wasn't fully frozen when I caught him. And obviously I dragged him back home. And I left him in here, and then, you know, like the day after, I skinned him. But here's the problem. I think what I'm going to do for now on when it comes to the beavers, just because of one of the problems I ran into was, like, the pelt was starting to pool up with oil and grease and and all that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze them overnight, let them completely freeze solid on the core, so I don't get as much blood running out of them and stuff like that. So when you go, you know, you can thaw them out just enough to skin them, and then at least, because the blood, my snowbanks are completely red out there right now trying to clean this guy off. Cutting the tail off was pointless. There's no reason to cut the tail off, in my opinion. It doesn't make it any easier to get at the fur, and more blood was coming out of the beaver. Again, the beaver being completely thawed, you know what I mean, like right at the core. So I'm going to freeze them, and then I'm going to thaw them, and then I'm going to, just so that it you know, thickens up the blood a bit, because this thing, I had the pelt rolling, and, you know, every time you rolled it, the pelt was in the blood, that type of thing. But poking the holes to get the pelt to go around the top of the wrist part, you know, of the legs, that's what would have saved me so much time yesterday. Now, so the next beaver I'll know. But as soon as I watched his video, it's like, you know, because I couldn't watch it the night that I caught it, because the power went out, right? And the internet was out not last night, the night before. So I wasn't able to do that refresher. But those little refreshers, I'm telling you, really, really makes a big difference when you go to, what am I doing for time? When you go to skin them. And then, of course, yesterday I did like 3 hours of uploading again. So I'm going to try to keep my videos short, because if I'm going to, you know, the Beaver Blitzkrieg is going to take precedence over my videoing. I'm not going to film every beaver I skin, because that just take too much work. But it's a really nice pelt. But the biggest problem I had was with the blood. That was my biggest stress with it. Was I didn't mind spending the 2.5 hours as much as, you know, trying to keep it clean. I constantly had to keep putting snow on it, you know, keep it wet. I'm going to probably try to somehow wash this pelt. Or rinse it to get all the blood off it, because it's, you know, the beaver market isn't what it used to be, and everything devalues. You know, it's like they really work against the trapper on that, and I do understand why. I mean, you know, people are buying, you know, if this pelt, let's say, is we'll say $60, okay, or $30, whatever, you'd say that's not very good. Yeah, but if the guy's buying 100 pelts at $25, you know, that's what it is. You know, they sell these things in batches of 100, right? So a $15 pelt, okay, on a batch of 100, you see how much money these fur people are putting out to buy that. That's why they bring, you know, like if they can bring down $2 here, $2 there, $4 here, or $10 there, it might be a deal. You know, a better deal for the, so that's why they work against us a bit that way. That said, I want the nicest presentation, so your presentation can offset any of that stuff. But the biggest things was the grease and the blood that I had to deal with. The leg thing, okay, I've learned my lesson. I know what to do now. Everything else went fairly well. I don't know if I like the table method as much. Hanging them, even if it was the same amount of time, which I think that my record is 45 minutes skinning a beaver. I know for some people that's not very much, but you got to understand a 62-pound beaver is a monster beaver. Like that's it's not the biggest one. My biggest one to date was 84 pounds, and I've heard of. We had one years ago. My dad caught. I remember him pulling out of the trap. I thought he was pulling a bear out of it. It was 120 some odd pounds. That's the biggest beaver I've ever seen in my life. It literally was. It was so big. It was so big. I was like 10 or 12 years old or whatever. I remember trying to hold this thing up. I'm like, oh my god, this thing's heavier than me. It was just a beast. But these are big beavers, and I know there's going to be more monsters. This is a good indication of what I'm going to be up against. So if this is the first beaver, I want to get the Beaver Blitzkrieg stuff out as much as I can, but I'm going to reassess how I'm doing that. I'm not going to talk about it right now because I'm not sure 100% what I want to do with that. But I might stick with fewer traps. So I might hold off. I'll put out all my conibears and just my conibears. I've got 2 conibear sets left to fix up, and then everything's ready to go. But I'm going to start bringing these out today anyway. So anyway, this is some little tips and just let you guys know how I'm doing. There we go.